Hey everyone, this is Dave, W7UUU, and Dave's Radio Shack. We had a recent presentation by Mike Ritz, W7VO, the Northwestern Director for the ARRL at the Radio Club of Tacoma, W7DK. His program is What Follows, and it covers a couple of really big issues. Probably the big one for everybody is discussion of the recent situation involving N2RJ, another ARRL director, Jairam, that came about as a conflict in a book publication issue. So he covers that issue from his perspective, and then also some important new updates, including new rules for the 2023 field day, which I thought were kind of interesting. And then another program that Mike has been very much behind called the CSI program, the Clean Signal Initiative, that I think many will find interesting. So there's other things in his report as well, all as a follow-up to the recent board of directors meeting. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the program. It's kind of long. It's about 50 minutes. It's fresh, hot off the presses kind of information, and probably the first time that this is getting out there for people to see and to digest. So anyway, thanks for watching. Again, this is Dave, W7UUU.
Well, that brings us directly to our program. Our ARRL Northwest Director, Mike Ritz, Whiskey 7 Victor Oscar, is attending, and he will make a presentation on an update on all things for ARRL for 2023. Mike, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Thank you guys for inviting me here today. I sure had a great time at your Christmas dinner. I can't wait for the next one. This is very good timing because we just had a couple of weeks ago. I was where you see behind me here. That's what the ARRL boardroom looks like. It's a big giant room at the Marriott Hotel in Windsor, Connecticut, about 6 miles from the airport. And we all sit around in a great big square on the inside where the directors are, on the outside or where all the vice directors sit. So each vice director sits directly behind their director. And so my seat is right about there, but that may be my computer right there that you're looking at. And then Mark Tharp would be seated right here. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about here is what happened at that ARRL board meeting, what's going on with my committee assignments, and let's go ahead and get started. And we're going to talk a little bit. How many people here have heard about the Jairam N2RJ, issue where she got recused? So there's a few people on here. How many people have watched the video that she did, the interview that she did with Ham Nation Now? Okay, well, you're going to learn that the other side of the story tonight. Beyond what you guys heard there. It was a very interesting predicament. And so we're gonna start with that. But let's go ahead. Let me share my screen. And somebody needs to actually think, oh, there we go. I'm Mike Ritz, W7VO, Director of the Northwestern Division. And here's what we're going to talk about in our discussion tonight. We're going to start off by what Mark Tharp and I, the Vice Director, KB7HDX, have for our leadership committee assignments, what we're going to be doing on the board this year. We're going to have a discussion about a special board meeting that was held the board meeting was so long, it actually was conducted over 2 almost full days of debate. And on November 22nd, November 30th, this was a special board meeting to discuss the Jairam issue that ended up becoming a recusal. We're going to talk about what's going on with latest with the ARRL Program and Services Committee, which you'll find out that I am chairing again this year. A look at the 2023 field day rules. You guys are going to be the first ones that are going to know what's going to happen with field day this year. So congratulations to that. It hasn't even, the minutes are still being done. An update on the ARRL Clean Signal Initiative program. The people that know me for a while know that I have been driving this through the board. I've been asked to serve on the committee that's putting the program together. And we've actually, in the last month or so, had quite a bit of progress on it. And I want to talk a little bit about that. This is really, I think, one of the most important programs that the league has ever put together. And I'm very enthused with it. And this will be kind of my hallmark program. I think when I leave the board, it'll be something I can look back on and say, hey, I was a part of that. We're going to talk a little bit about the ARRL Foundation Scholarship Program, what's going to happen for this year. I am also on the ARRL Foundation. A January 2023 ARRL board meeting review, and then if we have some time and you guys aren't all asleep, we'll have a little Q&A at the end. So the leadership assignments for this year, basically the same as it was last year. I'm the chair of the Program and Services Committee. That's the committee that deals with operating events like this VODA event we're having right now, field day, contests, awards, a logbook of the world that kind of falls under that's being handled right now by a separate committee. I'm also a member of the band planning committee. So if there's any question about us coming up with the revision of the existing band plans, I want to a member of that committee. I'm also was elected this year again to be the vice president of the ARRL Foundation. For people that aren't familiar with the foundation is, it's the league's separate company that is the ARRL's scholarship and grant purveyor. We issued quite a few dollars, especially last year, in grants and scholarships. And I've also been asked, even though I didn't really want to be, I've been asked to stay on as a member of the Clean Signal Initiative Committee. Once this thing was through I got it through the board, I wanted to kind of back away with it and let staff deal with it. Well, they needed some guidance on it, so I'm kind of staying on that committee, but not really a super active part of it, just to kind of make sure that they stay on what the initial intent was of CSI. Mark Tharp, our vice director, is currently remaining on chair of the Amateur Radio Board International Space Station Committee. Now, that's not the actual program itself. He's not the chairman of that ARRS group. He is essentially the liaison between the ARRL and ARRS. So he works very carefully with Rosalie White and the people that are running that program to make sure that the ARRL is involved in it. And he's also a member of the MCOM Field Services Committee. Was there a question? Okay, somebody's got their speaker on. So anyway, so that's what we're doing this year. Pretty much the same as we did last year. And of course, being director, I get twice as much to do as Mark does. But someday he'll have his turn. So let's talk a little bit about the special board meeting that was held in November. And this had to do with the Ethics and Elections Committee. There's a special committee on the ARRL board. It's a 3-member panel appointed by President Roderick, whose job it is to kind of monitor what's going on, what the board's doing ethically, and what members on the board doing ethically, and also resolving any disputes that happen as a result of elections, where there's some kind of unfair election practice going on. A director, for example, trying to interfere in another director's division to try to sway the outcome of an election, good old politics. Well, this particular one, and I didn't know too much about this, or I really didn't know anything about it at all until the special board meeting came on, because I am not on any committees that Rhea Jairam is on, and I'm not a member of the NE committee. So this was really kind of in the dark for the rest of us on the board until the special board meeting came up. So I kind of came into this thing blind and with really no predetermined judgment as what the outcome would be. So it was really rather interesting. But this meeting took place literally over 2 full 8-hour days. It was not something that was taken lightly. It was basically very similar to what you might imagine, I guess, in a trial would be, because there were lawyers involved, and it was really, really rather interesting. However, don't think that this was anything in any way related to what happened to Dick Norton N6AA in 2018 and the infamous code of conduct. The board cooked up, they didn't like Dick Norton, some of the members of the board, so they cooked up this code of conduct that and then kind of trapped him into falling under it so they could kick him off the board. So which was really really bad. This has really nothing to do with it. This has to do with a breach. And when you find out what Rhea did, the very first words in my mouth or my brain were, "What the hell was she thinking?" And we're going to talk about exactly what she did. And you guys can draw your own conclusions. You may completely disagree with my analysis of it, but based on the evidence, I have to agree what was done with her. And that I think she should feel lucky that there wasn't more. In June of 2022, Rhea submitted a disclosure. She filed a disclosure paperwork with the E&E committee to say that she was working on a technician study guide, right? And it's like, oh, okay, so She didn't say very much about it, and the committee looked at it and said, well, okay, we trust you. It does, if as long as it's not a conflict of interest, don't worry about it. Go ahead and do it. So she did. They placed their trust in her that the publication was not going to compete with something that the ARRL was already selling. Well, in October of 2022, David Minster, our CEO, found out that RIA had published a technician class license manual. By the way, the technician manual that the ARRL sells is twice the price of the one that RIA put together. And of course, how much information can you put in there that's different than what's in any other publication as far as the study guide is concerned? It's not a whole lot different, except that the people that were selling it that RIA contracted with were very aggressive marketers. It's being marketed through Amazon, through eBay, through Target, through Walmart, through all these retail channels, which of course the ARRL does not deal with. So a very aggressive marketing strategy, a very aggressive price for the book, and in direct competition with the ARRL's Technician Class License Manual. As a matter of fact, if you look at the front of them there's the ARRL one on the left, and it says on there, everything you need to know to get your first ham radio license. And there's RIA's book on the right, Ham Radio Technician Class Study Guide. Everything you need to know to get your technician license. Is there a whole lot different in there? No, not really. And if you open them up, you found there's not a whole lot different inside either, because after all, how many times can you answer a question that might be on a test? So, David Minster felt that this was a serious threat to our publishing business. His job as CEO is to make sure that the company is protected. And he saw one of the ARRL directors essentially competing with the ARRL itself in this publication business. And so he did not take it lightly. He had to ask the E&E to look into it. This wound up being a potential conflict of interest. And to make things even worse, RIA was a member of the A&F committee, the Administration and Finance Committee, where they talked about book publishing strategy and setting the prices for book, and talked about marketing strategies and how they're going to increase sales of books. She was on that committee as a committee member. And she made no effort to recuse herself from any of the discussions. She sat there, listened to everything they had to say, and then published a book. The E&E tried to get some more clarifications from RIA as to why did you do this? How did you do this? To try to find some way to mitigate what appeared to be a very serious situation. And then it turns out that RIA had actually signed the contract and was writing the book before she even turned in the paperwork that said that there may be a conflict of interest, and for them to look into it. So she was already writing the book before she asked, but one of those things, I guess, where she wanted to write it and then come back later and ask for permission, right? Well, that doesn't always work. And then finally, it came up to October. RIA and E&E kind of got into a little, tit for tat match where RIA just kind of basically shut down and said, I'm not going to talk to you guys anymore, period, we're done. And she was convinced she'd done nothing wrong. After all, they gave her permission, and espouses to that to this day. If you guys watch the social media, the stuff that's been out there on the Ham Nation, she doesn't think she did anything wrong, and she's still saying that today. Section 46 of the ARRL bylaws clearly defines what constitutes a conflict of interest on the board. And it arises when a board member or vice director has a business, personal, professional, or financial familial interest, affiliation, relationship that could materially conflict with the obligation of the board of a board member or vice director of the ARRL. They're essentially not permitted to engage in any activity that directly competes with the business interests of the ARRL and violate their fiduciary obligations to the organization. One of the things they teach you in business school is if something seems like it's unethical, it probably is. If you have to question it, the fact you're questioning it means that there's definitely a certain doubt of whether something's ethical or not. And I think this certainly falls into that. If she didn't break any laws, what she did, in my opinion, and once again, my opinion, this was unethical to do. As I said before, my first thought was, what the hell was she thinking? E&E concluded that she had, that by doing all this stuff that she did, it did create a conflict of interest, and they originally recommended that she be removed from office. Now, According to Connecticut law, that's very, very difficult to do. There's only two ways to remove a director from their position on the board. One of them is by going back to the people that elected her and having a recall election. And the second thing to do is to physically file a claim in court and have a judge decide to remove her from the board. But the ARRL itself cannot do that without a whole lot of problems. So there were a lot of discussions on during that particular board meeting as to exactly what should be done. They decided, instead of trying to remove her, they decided to make what's called a level 1 recusal, which means that she could stay on the ANF, she could do everything she was doing, but she couldn't sit on the ANF meeting when they're talking about publication strategies and about what the next book is that we're going to do. Any marketing plans they were talking about related to publications, she just couldn't sit on those discussions. I don't see a problem with that. I hope you guys don't either. The board during that meeting, finally, after basically 2 days of discussions, decided to recuse her on a vote of 11-3. Rhea was one of the 3 dissenting votes. The other 2 were lawyers that basically said, you can't go after Rhea because she's a female person of color, and to do so is very bad optics, and the league's going to wind up with a big black eye. Well, it became really a no-win situation for the board. You don't want to set a precedent, that a director can start up their own publishing business and take money out of the mouth of the league. And at the same time, Rhea's able to go out there and be the victim. So, I mean, there's no winner in this situation at all. With this recusal, she retained her seat on the board and even her ANF committee assignment. She has to excuse herself when ANF discussions are centered on publishing strategies and plans. I mean, you can't get much more of a penalty than that. Now, at this point, I talked to Minster here about a week or so on this. They're not planning any further action against her. Hopefully, she learned her lesson. And when Rick Roderick recently announced the assignments for all the committees, she is no longer on the NF committee. He moved her over to the MCOM committee. So she's no longer needs to be recused because she's not on the committee anymore that deals with those. So essentially, the recusal itself essentially was over as of when Rick Roderick appointed the new committee members here about a week ago. And yes, there have been some member reactions. I got, I think, so far about 7 emails from Northwestern Division members. Rhea went on a campaign to start notifying big donors of what her plight and how they were picking on her. And what I found so far is once I explained exactly what the situation was from the other side of it, some people were wondering why there wasn't a way to fire her and kick her off the board. I did have one member that said, well, Rhea is Rhea, and she's so valuable to amateur radio as a whole, you guys really should have looked the other way. Well, that's not what laws are made for, unfortunately. But I mean, so the board, this was a decision of Minster and the board to go ahead and take it on the chin, and people want to complain about it, think we're idiots for doing this, and that she's, that Rhea's Rhea, and she's the future of amateur radio. Rhea's a great person. I get along well with her on the board. She's, really a kind of a bright, shining star as far as the future of amateur radio is involved. But once again, I go back to what the hell was she thinking when she did this? So any questions on that before we move on?
Question.
How many people, I see, especially in there, I can see the thing. How many people in there, think that maybe the league is on the right side of this?
Mike, we have a question in the classroom.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm wondering if the conflict of interest posed was specifically due to her not recusing herself from the committee involvement with publication, or if it was due to her act of publishing this manual at all. Specifically because ARRL is a nonprofit organization with a mission, straight from the website, to advance the art, science, and enjoyment of amateur radio. So I would think that based on that, they would care less about whatever profit that they're getting from their publishing business and more about the clearly better marketing efforts that she was doing with her technician guide than ARRL seems to be capable of.
Yeah, and that's an argument, but the override, if you take a look at what the laws are from the American Bar Association having to do with fiduciary responsibility of directors, specifically for directors of nonprofits, they are bound by law to put the organization first, beyond their own personal interests. So the fact that and one could also argue that the E&E committee should have put a stop to it before, as soon as they found out about it. But their argument was that they trusted that what she was going to do was not going to be in direct competition with the ARRL, and it wound up that it was. So, I kind of blame Rhea in a way in the fact that she should not have put the board in that position and put the E&E in that position by agreeing to do a book that had the potential of being a conflict of interest. So I think she was a little lackadaisical about that. I also believe that perhaps the E&E committee put a little bit too much trust in her. But the two words I'm going to say to you guys is fiduciary responsibility, and that's a responsibility that any director of a nonprofit, if the nonprofit doesn't make any money, it doesn't exist. So the ARRL gets quite a bit of their revenue. They get a lot of revenue from membership, but they also get a lot of revenue from their publications. So the question is which is better, the overall good of amateur radio or the ARRL remaining in existence? And some people would say that amateur radio is more important than the ARRL. Some people would say that if there was no ARRL, there probably would not be any amateur radio. So I'll leave that up to you guys to decide. Does that answer your question?
For the most part, yeah, I think so. It basically comes down to her fiduciary responsibility to the organization, not so much her involvement specifically on that committee.
Correct.
Okay.
And what's the
Correct,
future of her publication?
What's that?
What's the future of her publications going forward?
As far as I know, they're not going to make any effort to stop it. It's a very competitive market. I mean, the company that she contracted with, and I think she made somewhere around $10,000 on the writing of the book. She has no royalty agreement with them, and so if they can sell as many books as they have, and she got her money for writing, and that was kind of the end of it. So really, it falls on to the other one. I think that Minster at one time was looking to figure out some way to put a halt on it, but he can't halt the competition selling a book. That they have no right to. So they would have to prove that it was a ripoff of an ARRL book, which it's not. It's apparently it's written very well. I haven't seen it, but I have read the reviews of it, and it's got 27 5-star ratings on Amazon. So I mean that kind of tells you right there. I don't know how many they've sold. I hope they make their money back on it, but that's up to them to figure out. But like I said, they do have a very aggressive marketing strategy for the book. Before it was even out for publication, it was already being advertised on Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Amazon, Target. All the big major outlets had that book on their, not really on their shelf, even on eBay. There were copies available you could buy on eBay of that book, even before, I think 2 days before it was actually published. So they were taking orders for it before it even came out.
Question?
Any more questions?
Yes.
Yes.
This is Alpha Bravo 7 Delta Golf Doug. Just a question. I assume that she, had a desire to be recognized as a technical author. Does ARRL offer her opportunities to be the author of any books that it publishes?
Absolutely, because they would not be in competition. Now, there are several other directors that have written books. One of the things that she talks about, if you listen to her podcast on the YouTube thing that she did with the Ham Nation, is that Carl Luschel-Schwab, K9LA, an ARRL director, has a book on propagation that he just published through CQ magazine. It does not compete with an existing ARRL publication. They've never written a book on related to specifically on propagation. And he had written that book before he was an ARRL director originally, and did a rewrite of it here fairly recently, and got E&E approval to do so. So she talks about that in her, but that was really Carl had to wrote the board an explanation of the fact that what she said was not totally based in fact, and he gave us his side of what happened. But I think if she'd offered to write a book for the ARRL and they decided to publish it, it would not be a problem. Did that answer your question, Doug? Okay,
Yes,
any more
thank you.
questions before we move
Thank you.
on here? I don't want to dwell on this, but say it's been a very hot topic. I just wanted to give you guys the other side of it, and I am not on Rhea's side on this. I like, as I mentioned, I like Rhea. I just don't think she should have done this. I don't think she should have put the board of directors and the ARRL in the position that she did. But you know, Rhea is she has goals of what she wants to do in her ham radio career. You know, she's on YouTube. She does all these. She does a lot. And that's part of her goal, is to, you know, put herself out there as much as she can. And this is just part of that. And I have to really say that you know, I wish her success in it. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on. So let's talk about what's been going on with the PSC, the Program and Services Committee. If you guys, has anybody been involved at all with the volunteers on the air yet? Have they heard anybody calling CQ out there for volunteers of the air? It's the latest year-long ARRL operating event for this year, 2023. And you're going to hear W1AW stroke 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, KH6, BP2 on the air, very similar to what you did in what you heard in 2014 with the ARRL Centennial. I'll be on this weekend for my second time handing out points for the volunteer there. You can go on the ARRL website, vervoda.arrl.org, and get more information about it. And I believe it's also been in the last couple of issues of QST, but PSD has been working to try to help put this together. We've also been working very carefully with the Contest Advisory Committee on some ARRL contest rule changes. Some of the changes they made in the last couple of years, one of them was earlier last month was the ARRL Ready Roundup, which we removed FT8 from and made that its own separate contest, which happens in June. And not only I operated all of Ready Roundup. We made over 1,000 contacts on Ready that weekend from my station here. And I think it was a big success. If there were more stations to work on Ready, they weren't all hiding over on FT8. And to offset that, they have the ARRL International Digital DX Contest, which is also a big success. I think they had about 1,800 logs entered for that contest in June. So I think that splitting that off was a pretty good decision. They're working right now on some updates to VHF contest. There were some questions as to whether they wanted to change for some of the frequency bands, the limits, the narrowness limits of how far stations had to be apart to have a valid contact. Originally, it was, I believe, 5 kilometers. And there was a discussion, or excuse me, it was at 1 kilometer. They wanted to move it out to 5 kilometers because of the technology changes, you know, of using FT8 in the VHF contest to make things that to make the signals go a little farther. I think they're still working on that. And that's still kind of up in the air. The big question came up, we talked about quite a bit in our last PSC meeting, was what to do for field day for 2023. You know, do we go back to the way it was before? Have things improved since we made some changes that we did for COVID? So here's what we wound up coming up with. We decided to focus this year on maximizing the fun factor of field day, because field day really is whatever you want it to be. Some people use it as an MCOM event. The contester guys use it as a contest. A lot of clubs go out and use it as their beer and pizza weekend, you know, and the contact part of it is a little bit different. So the idea was what to do with the current rules and, you know, make it as fun as possible for as many people as possible. So this is what we came up with. One of them was during the COVID period, we decided to approve what was called aggregate scoring, where some people that couldn't make it out to a field day site with their club could have their club score added with the club score that was in the field and come up with the total club score. We decided to keep this as is. You know, as people get older, they're not going to want to go out and stay in a swamp-infested spot and operate. They could operate from home, and people wanted to go out in the field, go out in the field. And really, what it does, it really keeps everybody in the game. We're all getting older. Some people aren't going to want to stay out there and operate, but a lot of people will. And then there was a big question. The largest complaint that I received in the PSC had about field day was figuring out some way to keep FT8 from completely taking over field day, as it does, as it has, been a disruptive force for most of amateur radio. And what we decided to do was to flatten the QSO scoring under paragraph 7.1 of the field day rules. It was currently at phone contacts worth 1 point each, CW worth 2 point, digital worth 2 point. We decided, well, let's go ahead and flatten it all out at 2 points each at the 100-watt power level. So it doesn't matter what mode you want to work, the same point level. There won't be any advantage to operating FT8 over sideband. There won't be any advantage to operate CW. And I know the CW guys hate this because they'd rather have the more points for CW than sideband. But and one of the arguments I heard was that well, if you don't give them more points, they won't go to the trouble to set up CW stations. I got news for you: the CW guys will get there anyway. It's not really a contest, and if they're all flat, everybody will have fun. There's still some debate about this, and if people scream loud enough about it, the phone guys aren't going to scream. You guys are going to scream about it to the CW guys. But we'll see. We'll see just how much they scream. There was another thing about allowing Class D and Class D to Class D contacts to receive point contact or point credits. We decided to keep it as is, but Class D to Class D will remain at the 100-watt power level. So they're not going to be able to operate any high power at all, which brings up the next part of it, or the part you'll see here in a second. And also, if you looked at how they did the field day reporting for this year, the only classes that were listed in QST were the class A, B, C, and F. And the home stations, D and E, were available. Their scores were available on the website only. And that was primarily to save space. But if you want to have your score listed and be in QST, it's got to be an A, B, C, or an F station, not a home station. So that was another allotment that we did. Another thing that we did was there were a few people that complained about not having enough power to get work out of canyons, especially down in Southern California and some of the places that were did have less than optimum there. So we decided for this year to bring back a limited high power 500-watt only category. Most members like the 100-watt rule. They got a lot of positive feedback on that, but we also got some people that said, you know what, you took all the fun out of it, because we could only make a fourth of the contacts that we did when we're able to run amplifiers, and it was it wasn't fun anymore, and everybody went home. But one thing to keep in mind was, if you guys that did operate field day this last year, propagation was really, really bad. There was a big CME event, and propagation really, really sucked. And so there were stations that basically didn't make any contacts because I think the A index was somewhere around 20 or 22 or something like that for the whole weekend. So it was just miserable for everybody. This was a compromise, once again, to increase the fun factor. But remember that the high power, running the high power 1500 or 500-watt class gives you a 50% point cost, because instead of the contacts being worth 2 points, they're only worth 1 point each. So once again, there's an incentive to run 100 watts and not run higher power. And one thing to keep in mind is it's about a 1 S unit difference on the other end, running 500 versus 100, so it's not a whole lot of difference. And 501 amplifiers can easily be run on 110 volt emergency power for the MCOM guys. A lot of MCOM EOCs have small power amplifiers that they can run. So it kind of makes sense. 1500 watt amps, that run on 240 volts, not so much of an MCOM focus at all. The point multipliers are going to be the same as they were before, ×1 for high power, ×2 for low power, ×5 for QRP. I tried to think about making the QRP one higher, try to get more people to try to operate QRP, but there didn't seem to be a lot of interest on the PSC. I thought maybe let's do ×10 for QRP for the guys that want to run 5 watts. but there wasn't much interest to make that change, so we left that alone. The one big change we made also was I got several emails from people, and the band conditions were so bad. And you think about the GOTA stations, right? In order to get any GOTA credit, you had to make 20 QSOs to get the 20 bonus points. And there were some GOTA stations, because GOTA stations don't get the big tri-banders, they don't get the latest radios. They get somebody's beat up old TS520 in a dipole over in the corner to operate. They don't get the big, the big stations. And there were several GOTA people where people tried to operate, tried to make points and couldn't because the band conditions were so bad. And so they shut everything down and went away, and they lost the opportunity to get people to get newcomers in there to be able to operate. So what we decided to come up with instead was to come up with bonus points for the GOTA station with tiers as far as the level of where the bonus points go. This is still kind of in flux as far as the staff figuring out exactly what they're going to do here. But instead of trying to reach a plateau and then you get points, they're going to try to make it so that it's a fixed point system. It might be 1 point of contact. It just adds with the score, with the club score. If they get 20, they get 20 more bonus points. The idea is to keep that GOTA station active. And in essence, the neat thing about this, in my opinion, is that the GOTA station could wind up literally, if you keep it going with enough people, enough beginners on there, it could make more points than the main station does. So the idea here is to have the emphasis on getting the new people involved and promoting amateur radio. So we'll see how this goes. The final rules on this are not complete yet. I haven't seen what we asked staff to come back with exactly what they wanted to do, and I haven't seen what it is yet. And so these changes I've discussed were probably most likely going to be the new normal for field day, but let's wait and see what happens for this field day. I think we've reached a very good compromise and have tried to maximize the fun factor here as much as we can. Let's talk a little bit about the Clean Signal Initiative, the activity that I've been involved in. This was just a reminder, was passed 15-0 in a board vote in January of 2022, exactly a year ago. And it does three things. It helps clean up interference problems on the HF bands by ensuring that signals that are being emanated from transmitters are as clean as possible. And it puts the ARRL in the technical standards business, going beyond what the FCC requires and establishing transmitter and amplifier purity standards for manufacturers to meet and be certified to. Think of IEEE standards, right? There's standards for all kinds of things. There's UL standards. Think of the ARRL certifying radios that they meet a certain technical standard for purity as a way to clean up some of the ham bands. And there's also a part of this initiative that follows it up with an educational component, with the ARRL producing videos and providing information for hams, especially new hams, on how to set their radio up for the cleanest possible signal. And also working with manufacturers to have default settings that provide the cleanest possible signal. So where are we now with this? It's been going a year. Where are we now? Well, we currently have 4 major transceiver manufacturers are on board with us. I've been attending the meetings, and there's been some discussions, and we're looking at setting benchmarks for certain parameters. Those benchmarks are going to be for spurious emissions, including harmonics, intermodulation distortion, or IMD, on single sideband, composite phase noise. Digital synthesizers. The digital make a lot of phase noise out there that can actually be maybe only 50 dB down below the carrier, and at 1500 watts, that still winds up being a few milliwatts of power that can still increase the bandwidth. I look at the CW signal waveform here. Primarily, we're talking about the of the CW signal. If you have a fast rise time, what do you get? Key clicks. So if you ever heard key clicks on the air when you're tuning around in the CW area, that's a guy that has he wants the extra elbow room in the contest, so he turns the rise time up faster on the radio to maybe 1 or 2 milliseconds versus 6 that provides the cleanest signal possible. So setting limits and essentially creating what are called masks for all of these parameters, and then the ability to have the default setting for the rise time and fall time of the CW signal be around the 4 to 6 millisecond area. I just finished here last week an introductory article about the program. We're to the point, I think, where the ARRL is going to want to formally announce it to the world. I wrote the article for QST. It's currently in Becky Schoenfeld's hands, and we'll see when that's going to come out. But I imagine it'll be probably coming out here in the next month or so. Not month, the next couple of months, maybe in May or June. We'll see. Becky hasn't had time to look at it yet. I've also got Ed Hare at the RFI lab. Yes, excuse me, the ARRL lab, taking a look at it as well. So that's going to be coming out. Let's talk a little bit about the ARRL Foundation. 2022 was a banner year for us. We gave away about $1.5 million total between the foundation scholarship and the grant side of it. However, this year, because the stock market's been down, ARDC, the Amateur Radio Digital Communications, does not. They have lost money on their investments like everybody else has, so they were unable to fund as many scholarships as they did last year. They, like a lot of people do, live on their investments. You know, they don't give away the principal, they give away the investments on that principal as a restricted account. So we're going to be down about $250,000 this year on scholarships as a result. And some of the scholarships that the ARRL manages that are restricted scholarships, once again, that deal with providing scholarships out of the interest earned on the principal and not the principal itself, aren't going to have enough earnings to put the scholarships out. Some of them have done very well that have been around a long time because the stock market's done very well over a long period of time, so there's enough money to absorb the losses. But some of them that are fairly new that have that restriction will not be able to be awarded this year. So we're still expecting to award about $700,000 in scholarships this year. That's still up from around 100,000 as it was when I first came on the ARRL Foundation in 2019. So we're still 6 or 7-fold over where we were. So still doing very well. For 2023 so far, we have about 300 applicants for the over 100 scholarships. And last year we had about 175 applicants. I don't know what happened to all of a sudden to get us 300 applicants. I did a presentation for QSO today about the foundation, and it may have been there. And I did a presentation for the PacificCon about the foundation scholarship program, and I'd like to think it came from that, but I don't know where it came from. But our applications this year are up almost double what they were last year. The window was open from October till December, and at the end of this month, I just found out we've got everything pretty much in the database is ready to hand out to everybody to start getting the work of vetting for the scholarships. Starting with the ARDC $25,000 scholarships and working our way down. So towards the end of this month, the work on this begins, and my life becomes a living hell for about the next month after that, with because we have to interview every single candidate for in teams for an ARDC scholarship, and that winds up being a lot of Zoom time and a lot of meetings to get the work done. But you know, it's really rewarding work when you see what the future of amateur radio looks like and all these really smart kids that are out there. We hope to have it all wrapped up by the end of March. Let's talk a little bit about the board meeting itself. One of the things that the board voted to do this time was to put $150,000 into helping fund ARRL division conventions. The Southwestern Division, there's a couple of other divisions in other regions of the United States that basically had to give up on their conventions and their Hamfest because the venue cost became so high, it was not profitable at all for a club or even several clubs to put on a convention. And you know, conventions are a great way to communicate with members. They're a great way for members to meet each other. And the league decided to put some money into helping support conventions that are either struggling or have gone away entirely, especially when you get into areas like Los Angeles, like New York. You know, they're doing them in the outlying areas, even Portland. We're very lucky in the fact that CPAC continues to do very well. They continue to be profitable, and we're going to have a CPAC here. They're probably not going to be part of this $150,000, but I'll leave that up to them to decide if they're going to try to apply for a grant. one of the things that happened, which became rather tenuous or rather controversial, were suggestions to improve communications between section managers that run at the field level and division directors without any direct oversight of section managers by directors. There was a group of people on the MCOM Field Service Committee that wanted section managers to report to the division directors, where there was a chain of command. There are several division directors in the various sections that basically don't do anything, and they have no accountability. They got the job, they want to be section manager, but once they're there, they don't do anything. And some of them don't communicate very well with their directors. It's, I don't report to you. I don't have to listen to you. Like, you go have your fun, I'll have my fun. And so there's been a lot of communication issues that goes on. There was figure out some way to solve that problem, but what they decided to do was to have have each director hold a what's called like a council, and invite the section managers there to communicate with them and find out what we can do to help them out without directly supervising what they do or telling them what to do. So the field organization remains the field organization. The directors, vice directors remain doing what they do. There was also a new committee going to be formed called the Radio Forum Platform Committee that's going to work on what's going to wind up being a major overhaul of the logbook of the world system and really bring it in the 21st century. There was a minor effort to do this a few years ago. They actually hired a couple of software engineers to make some updates to logbook of the world. And the then CEO took those people and put them on a different project, and nothing ever happened with the money. Logbook of the world is still floating out there. We're lucky it even still works. But now we're looking at things that we can do to make Logbook of the World do even more. For example, real-time live scoring and contests, right? Have an ARRL contest, you'll be able to have the QSOs automatically uploaded to Logbook of the World as you make them, and to be able to see who's leading a contest live during the contest. That'd be one application of this. And of course, the ability to quickly get awards issued, and also quickly provide results for the contest and provide for the awards as well. They also voted to allow staff to put together an amateur radio survey and as a working group, and put a survey out there to not only ARRL members, but to amateurs as a whole, to better have the league better understand what its members want, what they want from the league, and also why some chose not to be members. There's about 750,000 hams, or as I call them, licensees in the United States, and only about 150,000 of them are ARRL members. And what happened to the other group of them? Well, a lot of them aren't really hams. They're licensees, but they're not really hams. And the question is, how can the league do better to convert them from being licensees to being hams? And if they're hams, they're more likely to join the ARRL. So they're putting a committee together to study and to create a survey that they can put out there in the world and get opinions on how to solve the problem. They also voted to allow the CEO to develop training programs focused on training new and current technicians on how to use the current privileges they have. A lot of technicians don't know they've got phone privileges on 10 meters. And boy, 10 meters is hot right now. And I think if more did, if they knew how to use their radios on HF, they would probably get on there and have more fun than they're doing. So they're going to put together some training materials to help out the technicians use the privileges that they do have. Once they get a taste of that, maybe they'll get their general and move up in the amateur radio ranks. Certainly there's a hope for them to do that. As a result of the RIA issue in the previous meeting, they voted to have the Ethics and Election Committee work with the legal counsel of the ARRL to produce an E&E workbook. The people that wind up on E&E, I've served my time on E&E, so I can tell you, we really have nothing to go on other than what's written in the bylaws. None of us are lawyers. You'd think that people, the best person to have on an E&E committee would be a lawyer because they know what the laws are. Well, if we knew what the laws were, we'd probably be able to behave a little bit better as being part of an E&E committee. But so they're going to have somebody put together, work with our legal counsel to put together a workbook. That's not a code of conduct. It's going to be a how to do the job when you're on the E&E committee. The legislative advocacy committee, is working on our HOA relief. They're getting very close. If you notice that they had actually got a bill introduced right at the end of the last session, it'll be reintroduced under the new session. But that takes money. That takes money for the lobbyists that I'm sure turn around and give some of that money to some of the lawmakers. So they'd asked for additional funds to fund their efforts on behalf of solving the HOA problem and people to be allowed to put up antennas. And however, the board wanted to make sure that there was oversight on where that money was going. It just wasn't going to go to the committee, go to the lobbyists, and the board not have any visibility on exactly what's happening with the money. So we voted to give them the money, but oh, by the way, you're going to have to provide us a report at the next board meeting and subsequent board meetings as to exactly where the money's gone and what's the ARRL getting for their buck. We also voted to move ARRL awards, both club and individual, to a separate meeting. A lot of the meeting towards the end winds up being approval to clubs like the Radio Club at Tacoma and others that have been around for 50, 75, 100 years. And as we all get older, the clubs get older as well, and they're becoming more and more of those, to the point where there's 20 or 30 of them at every single board meeting. And we have to sit there and read the motions, approve the motions. The idea is to move all these awards to their own special meeting that'll be handled virtually, and invite the club members that are there also to watch us, be able to watch us and be part of the ceremony where we do the award right there at a virtual meeting. So I'm not sure how that's going to work. I think they're talking about having the first meeting maybe in March. So we'll see how that goes. They also voted that the ARRL cannot invest in cryptocurrency. Boy, there's a good timely one for you. Luckily, John Sager, our treasurer, already knew that. That was not a wise thing to do, but now it's officially on the books that the ARRL will not invest your money and the league's money in crypto. And keep in mind that what I've talked about here are will be out in the official board meetings. They're currently under review, and we're supposed to have the final. They're still finding minor typos in it. As of today, there's a couple more that I saw in there that people are commenting on. The plan is to have them be able to be approved by the end of this week, which means that I would imagine that Diane Middleton at headquarters would probably release them sometime next week, maybe the week after at the latest.
All right. Well, thank you very much for watching, and a big thanks to Mike Ritz, W7VO, for his presentation, and also for the Radio Club at Tacoma, W7DK. This is Dave, W7UUU, from Dave's Radio Shack. Have a great day.